I rise to make my contribution to this 2023 appropriation bill, aka the budget. Madam Speaker, I have to confess that my colleagues, Senators John and MP Bramble, did such a good job that I could easily pass up the contribution. I really don't know if it's largely because Senator John and myself are from the same discipline and background of management and management studies, and our colleague MP Bramble from our twin discipline of economics. Be that as it may, Madam Speaker, much of what I would have to say this evening would in large measure corroborate the stellar presentations from both my colleagues. Madam Speaker, on this occasion as I present on the 2023 appropriation bill, I move from a cursory investigation of the data to one or two propositions, pretty much in the same way as MP Bramble did, as he weaved his constituency out of the living-in conditions, not secondary data, but a person who was immersed in the day-to-day living and existence of what he and or she is speaking about. And I consider my 22 years or so in the Parliament and in my practice and close association with the issues at hand would have been an appropriate route. Nonetheless, Madam Speaker, I pivot to a critique of the Finance Minister's assertions. Maybe his aspirations might be a better expression. And like my colleague, I begin first with his statement number one, Madam Speaker, found in the executive summary in which, as MP Bramble said, and I repeat it for emphasis, growth in 2022 returns us to the pandemic levels of production, a return to normalcy. And to underscore what MP Bramble said, if 2019 is the benchmark, the state of normalcy, it is an era or a year in which we fared badly compared and contrasted to our neighboring colleagues. So at best, the confession that we are back to normalcy is equally a statement admitting that we are catching up. We have 3 years behind the standard or quality of life that we once enjoyed, if that is in fact the benchmark or flagship year. Madam Speaker, the honourable member argues that the mission for this year is to accelerate a sustainable, people-centered developmental transformation. That people-centered word, you would see, Madam Speaker, in some way has replaced the transformation and transformative expression and mantra of last year. What, Madam Speaker, we may ask, is the vehicle for this objective of achieving sustainable, people-centered developmental transformation? Well, in the eyes of the minister, fixing the roads. So, Madam Speaker, with some trepidation, and I laugh and smile a little bit, I recite roads, 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 and more roads. And as I say so, I'm remembering the song, Fix the Roads, once made popular by Yewusu in Mr. Charles' book. A Labour man, that's right. A Leeward man. A Leeward man and a Labour man. I'm speaking after the Minister of Tourism. I'm speaking after the Minister of Tourism, a Leeward and Labour man. And Madam Speaker, in this regard, to confirm what I'm saying, we can see the cover page. Building roads from recovery to resilience. It's there boldly. It is what is going to be the game changer for this year, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, 2023 is proclaimed not just a roads budget with over $50 million. Those are his words. But if we read paragraph 5, Roman numeral 1 in the executive summary, he went on to state, in a state, and these are my interpretations, he went on in a state of confusion or uncertainty to proclaim that the roads budget 2023 will confront that on the issue of insecurity. Madam Speaker, he anticipates the how question by stating that budget 2023, the roads budget will cut taxes, will have expectation of a cut in taxes and increase wages. I don't understand that myself, but I give him the benefit of the doubt. You see, Madam Speaker, what that statement reveals is that the government finds themselves in a veritable bind. They find themselves, Madam Speaker, between the devil and talk about the devil. His imps appear. I think that's how the expression goes. Madam Speaker,
I rise on a point of order. In fact, I'm asking my honorable friend to withdraw the remark that I'm a devil. He knows that what he has done there is he has crossed the line. He said, the devil has just arrived. I'm the one who has just arrived. Come on.
Never said that.
He's just arrived. No. Madam Speaker, you heard what I heard. You heard what I heard, Madam Speaker. You heard what I heard. Expression what? You shut your mouth. You're not in this.
Yeah.
Honorable members.
You're not in this.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members. And I've stopped your time. Honorable members, I'm going to remind members, as I've been doing, I feel as if it's been all day, to be very cautious of the parliamentary language. And this is a caution, again, for all members. For all members.
Madam Speaker, but he did call me devil.
Honorable member,
He did call me devil. And I'm not yielding the point. He did call me devil. It doesn't matter how they twist and turn. That is what he said. Shut your mouth now, I'm on my feet.
Honorable members.
How many times
Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members. I have to rule. Just a moment, honorable members. Honorable member, the allegation or the point, the substance of the point of order is that you call the Prime Minister devil, and the question is that you withdraw the reference. Is there a response to that, honorable member, before I make my ruling?
Madam Speaker, even though I may be provoked, even if the Honorable Prime Minister looks or thinks, I would not call him the devil. I was in fact making a statement, making a comparison, the devil, and he came in and finished the statement, the deep blue sea. You see, he joined the conversation.
And after that, what happened?
What after that? I said.
What you said after that? Speaking of
the devil.
Yes.
Imps appear.
Imps appear.
Yeah, imps.
Imps appear. All right.
I said that. I know time and occasion referred to the Honorable Prime Minister.
Very well. Let us move on.
Thank you.
Let us move on. But I caution everybody about the parliamentary language.
The fellow play back. You call me a devil. Is that all right? The leader Wouldn't apologize that they bust me head.
The Madam Speaker.
Okay. Honorable Member, I wish to resume your time.
I'm going to appeal, Madam Speaker, because until now, just as happened before, we had a good flow.
Yes, so I'm going to resume the count. I'm sorry, yes?
Madam Speaker,
Just a moment, I'll wait.
this is just, you talk about parliamentary language, but it's also, the Honorable Prime Minister has told 3 members on this side of the House to shut up. With little provocation.
I said, shut your mouth.
Which is the same thing. Not the same thing. You're dancing on the head of a pin, you know.
No.
The point of the matter
Didn't
is,
just
Madam
say that.
Speaker, beyond non-parliamentary language, nobody in this House has a right to tell another member shut up. Not even you, Madam Speaker. And you are in charge of the procedures of this House.
Well, you've never heard any
Precisely.
utterance, not even remotely.
Not from you.
From me.
So nobody else should do it, and the Honourable Prime
And
Minister
again-
should stop doing it because he will not intimidate any member on this side of the House.
Very well. And I am going to say this probably for the 6th time for the day. Let us be very mindful of the parliamentary language. One member made a statement today, and I thought he was almost echoing what I had said earlier. The children are listening. Example is powerful. Let us set the right example. Honorable Member, please continue.
Madam Speaker, if I may be permitted, my honorable friend from South Leeward was distorting a matter. And in the crosstalk, just as how he sat down, I say, shut your mouth. It is in that crosstalk, when he crosstalk, I tell him shut his mouth, because he was speaking something which was not truthful, and you were dealing with the matter. And that is the point. So when the Honorable Leader of the Opposition gets up with his twisting and turning just now, is dissembling, is not reporting what actually transpired here.
Madam Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister just said that I said something, right? I just want to know which part of the something that I said that gave rise to him asking me to shut my mouth. Is it the part where I said you love to be equating yourself with the devil? Is it that?
Just a moment, Honorable Member. Listen,
I just want to know.
we have to be careful how we allow things to descend. I am satisfied that whatever was said during crosstalk. Okay? I didn't hear it fully myself, but what we have to do is continue with the debate. Perhaps a private discussion afterwards. I'll be happy to facilitate it even in my chambers. If
So,
need
Madam
be.
Speaker,
But I'm
would it be
saying-
fair to have the Prime Minister withdraw that in the crosstalk,
Withdraw what?
telling me to shut my mouth?
No, but no.
Huh?
Honorable, no, we can't go on to that.
Then-
the point is where is the
he
where
is
does
happy
the crux of the debate
to be equating
where does the
himself
crux
with the devil.
of the debate lie?
He is happy with that, and I'm happy. Don't
Honorable
withdraw it,
Member,
but I'm happy
we
in
cannot-
my own mind that he is happy with equating himself
So
with the devil.
this is my ruling.
Madam Speaker, if he's now saying that I'm the devil, he should withdraw it. I didn't hear him say so.
No. I'm saying
I
that
didn't
you're
say
happy
that.
to equate yourself.
No,
I didn't say you're the
I didn't
devil.
hear him say that.
But you're talking about the devil so much that it must bring you some sort of joy.
Honorable members, both members, please take your seats. There's something that's going on here that is unfair. And it is unfair. No, I'm speaking. It is unfair to the honorable member for Central Kingston to have this interruption continue. I will not facilitate it. Honorable member for Central Kingston, please continue. Honorable member. Honorable member.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Madam Speaker.
yes.
And you know it has given me a very hard time, and I'm glad for your intervention.
I am always fair. Please continue.
Madam Speaker, I was making the point that in the suggestion, the assertion of the Honourable Minister of Finance, who proclaimed that roads was the way out, and is continuing to argue that in the process, this year's appropriation bill will see a state in which there will be no new taxes, and that there would also be simultaneously an increase in wages for public servants is an interesting dichotomy, Madam Speaker. It's interesting because we know that the government comes from a position in which they are short of cash. There's a deficit in the recurrent. And it's highly unlikely that a rational human being who is in a deficit position will dig a further hole to embarrass themselves. And that against the backdrop that they would in fact offer a salary increase. On the surface, it looks like generous. But I'm suggesting and contending, Madam Speaker, that they have no choice because in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are at the state in which there's no blood left. There's no blood left. In fact, we are on life support. We are on the drip. We are gasping. And you would have to be heartless under those circumstances to impose further burdens on the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I said on the surface, that's a reasonable argument. The senator today alluded to the fact, however, Madam Speaker, that there is an inflationary situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that also has to be added to the equation because we have unfinished matters that may well emerge in the course of this financial year. The national insurance scheme problem is a case in point because it is quite likely that workers may well be asked to pay more by way of deductions to the NIS contributions. And the employers may equally have to do the same thing. For many employers, a contribution to the NIS represents a tax. So when we say that there are no taxes, it may well not be the case. Madam Speaker, even when he concedes that they are short and they must increase wages, albeit too little, and not enough, in my mind, we still have the situation which he has to answer. Why have we found ourselves in that situation? Madam Speaker, I want to go to the Moody's report on the economic affairs of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I want to extract 4 important statements or findings or conclusions in that report with respect to St. Vincent. The report says we must not anticipate the governments will fully execute its capital plans this year. And this is what I want to highlight, Madam Speaker. St. Vincent has consistently over-budgeted capital expenditures. Moody's, the international reputable organization. St. Vincent has consistently over-budgeted capital expenditures. Between 2013 and 18, the budget included nearly 11% of GDP on average for capital expenditure, but actual spending on capital projects averaged just below 5%. That's below half of what we budgeted. This is a statement I have repeatedly presented in this House, that directors of audits have said that the capital proposals of the government are worthless and lacks credibility. It's coming out from the international agencies. Secondly, Madam Speaker, it says that these shortcomings aside, infrastructure projects, and I want to say that there are favorable things in the Moody report that the government could hold on to, so I'm not just extracting negativity for negativity because there's something that are complementary. But here it says, these shortcomings aside, infrastructure projects in logistics are central to increasing St. Vincent's long-term growth potential. Authorities are expected to begin construction work on the port development project. As you know, roads is fundamentally infrastructural, but sectorally it is construction, which has always been an important contributor to the GDP of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So let's acknowledge that. But Madam Speaker, Moody's report also says to us, economic growth in 2021 in St. Vincent was lower for St. Vincent than for other Caribbean sovereigns, and growth potential remains below that of B-rated peers. I highlight that, Madam Speaker, and I direct it to the Minister of Finance, through you. Because when he presented himself, I am sure one got the impression that we represented a good economic model, that we were outperforming our neighbors in the region. And I think MP Bramble have identified that that is in fact not the truth. Not the truth. Economic growth in 2021 was lower for St. Vincent than for other Caribbean sovereigns, and growth, we know what happened in 21. The fourth point made in the Moody's report, Madam Speaker, St. Vincent did not advance economically at the same rate that of its peers. Only Suriname, with a CAA negative, Cuba is CA stable, and Trinidad and Tobago, with a BA2 stable, performed more poorly than St. Vincent in 2021. So, Madam Speaker, in light of those situations, we understand that there have been certain challenges. Now, we can't have our cake and eat it. Madam Speaker, there's a sidebar that's taking place that is disrupting me, and it may well be deliberate. Just look at what look at
yes,
me, Madam Speaker.
But it is quite normal. I've seen it
it's
happen.
normal.
I've seen it happen repeatedly on both sides throughout my tenure here.
Thank you, Madam
Please
Speaker.
continue.
Thank you. The reason, Madam Speaker, why I said we can't have it both ways, it is also a fact that almost in all situations when countries experience natural disasters of one kind or the other, that they get a bounce, they get a lift. And it's indisputable that the amount of inflows that came to St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a consequence of the volcanic eruption far surpasses any provision that the government may have been able to raise for itself. In fact, there are people who are of the view that this administration benefits from disasters. Some people feel that way. I'm not going to join the discussion in that regard. Madam Speaker, my apprehensions drives me back to reflect on paragraphs 2 and 4 on page 1 of the Minister's address. What do we have there, Madam Speaker? Paragraphs 2 and 4. He says, moreover than that, we are filled with fresh hope that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. That the trials of disease and fiery cataclysms have forged us into a stronger nation. That we are on the road that leads from recovery to resilience and beyond. To accelerated development, increased opportunity, and an environmental sustainability in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Madam Speaker, that is Alice in Wonderland thinking. And you heard MP Bramble, and I'll have to call his name as often as this is necessary, stated the fact that we have a ridiculously high and climbing unemployment situation. All that he said with respect to East Kingston can be found in Central Kingston, West Kingston, and several other constituencies with the boys on the block. Unemployment, unemployment, and more unemployment. Wanting something to do. Wanting to help themselves. And Madam Speaker, it's just not happening. In essence, Madam Speaker, what we're hearing from the Minister of Finance is mere rhetoric. To the Madam Speaker, important as it is, because I'm not saying roads and roads improvement is not important, I'm saying the opposite, important as it is, necessary as it is, urgent as it is, by itself, it does not cut it. It cannot be the panacea. It cannot be the catalyst for sustainable development for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's not a blueprint for sustainable, people-centered development. Madam Speaker, to underscore, Madam Speaker, why the wage increases is necessary, which I explained to you before, and why we also have to be mindful, we have to take on board the fact, not just that there is inflation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which generally speaking is low. Generally speaking is low. But there is a benefit to at least one party from an inflationary spiral. If the goods that are coming into St. Vincent are increasing in value as a consequence of international affairs, then the government automatically gets a bigger take in customs duties and other charges, VAT and other related charges. So they're better off in terms of the receipts. That's the buffer. However, while they are better off from the improved takings at the port, consumers, generally speaking, are worse off through the fact that we have to pay higher prices in fuel charges, for electricity, for transportation, and fuel or energy is the salt in manufacturing and leads to increased prices across the board. In some cases, where a bag of bread may not have traded in price, instead of getting 5, you get 4. And even when you get 5, it's a smaller loaf of bread and a lighter loaf of bread for those people who buy, like the penny bread. I'm simplifying it. So Vincentians are up against it as a consequence of the domestic pressure and of the international pressure. And therefore, it is required in our society that we have an intervention that eases the squeeze. That's why, for example, my colleague made reference to reduction of the VAT as a consideration. Madam Speaker, beyond the rhetoric that we hear, which is not supported, if we compare and contrast ourselves with our neighbors, St. Lucia, for example, Madam Speaker, they have a tax revenue of $1 billion, but a capital expenditure of $382 million. St. Kitts, a total tax and grants revenue of almost $1 billion as well, 988 million to be exact. I rounded it off to $1 billion. Some other interesting statistics. The Citizens by Investment program brings in for them $500 million. But their capital expenditure is $153 million. Grenada, with a $1.1 billion total revenue and grants, has a capital expenditure of $313 million. Dominica brings in $492 million from the Economic Citizenship Program, something that we decry here. I'm not going to open or bring that debate, but I'm showing you how the people make money. Antigua has a capital expenditure of $333 million. But poor St. Vincent, catching your Nen and St. Vincent, that does not have their income stream, is proposing a capital program of $471 million. Madam Speaker, I've stated already that this is a situation that has been continuing for very, very many years, and one, Madam Speaker, which we have to put a stop to. Madam Speaker, in the course of my preparation for this budget, I came across in my research on page 34 of the 2017 audit, a very important revelation. And I'm going to read it in its entirety, bullet 262. The statement of capital revenue has shown that although domestic bond transactions were not, hear me carefully, although domestic bond transactions were not approved at the beginning of the financial year, $90 million was the highest contributor to capital financing on the domestic receipts. Loans, local loans of $72 million was the second highest contributor of public sector investment financing, and so on and so forth. And what it goes on to conclude, Madam Speaker, this source of revenue exceeded a budgetary projection, and they gave the figure. The statement goes on, Madam Speaker, to bring to the attention of us parliamentarians that this bond issue was not approved by the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Not approved by the Parliament. That is serious, Madam Speaker, and to be pursued. And that is the consequence, Madam Speaker. When we have these large financial shortfalls, this is the recourse. It's important to the extent, Madam Speaker, that we may listen to presentation upon presentation from the Minister of Finance. We're in 2023. We will not know if he is speaking the truth until 2028, when they're long gone. Long, long gone. When the next report comes out. And this is what has been happening to us for the last 20 years. The government has never been audited within its 5-year financial cycle. That's why they get away with a lot of things and a lot of blarney. And so, Madam Speaker, I come to the point, because I heard my colleague again recite the fact that repeatedly we heard never, and for the force in history. Well, I don't know if I'll get some help in what I call this never ever chorus, Madam Speaker. Because the budget, in as much as it is quantitative, it is also qualitative. Let's try this on, Madam Speaker. Never in the history of St. Vincent and Grenadines has crime, violence, and homicides been as bad as it is. Never has poverty and destitution been as bad as it is. Never, ever have we had as much homelessness and vagrants in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Never have we had unemployment and destitution as it is now. Never has the underemployment situation been as bad as it is now. Prostitution, helplessness, begging, debts. The other day I leave Kingston, I reached Calco listening 7:05 playing the death announcement. I reached Rocktown, they still playing death announcement. Pharmacies, one of the few growth countries. The number of vendors, never, Madam Speaker. Closure of businesses, never. Hopelessness, despair, never. Never had a situation as bad as this where people can't pay their light and water bills and rent. Victimization. Never, Madam Speaker, we had so much natural disaster. Never, Madam Speaker, we had so much grant money. Never, Madam Speaker, has the poor relief list been as big as it is. Those are some of the nevers. I move away from that, Madam Speaker. I move away from that, Madam Speaker. Because I don't want to end my contribution today, Madam Speaker, without having a look at the agricultural sector to make my case why roads and a roads program doesn't cut it. Madam Speaker, again, because we may have been exchanging notes and our thought patterns very often alike, the MP for East Kingston made reference to the fact that on page 421 of the budget, the Minister of Agriculture rightfully identifies in his strategic priorities export-led growth in traditional agricultural commodities and fishery products are important as a way out. He also says contribute to the reduction of the import bill by targeting specific commodities for local consumption. And last, he says, stimulate the private sector investment in the agricultural, forestry, and fisheries sector and encourage public-private sector partnerships. And next page, Madam Speaker, 422. He says, as part of the strategic plan, we must develop the commodity approach to production and marketing. But you know what the outcome, Madam Speaker? No work was advanced on this strategic priority. So this is in 2023, Madam Speaker. I have a reason for going here, you know. 2023. Madam Speaker, Minister of Agriculture, Honorable. In 2013, when I thought you were on the right track, you were asking in your ministry for improvement in banana production for 120,000 tons, I suppose, pounds. Orchids and ornaments, 8,000. Dashings, 40,000. Pineapple, 20,000. Cassava, 80,000. Sweet potato, 60,000. Yams, 10,000. Tanyas, 40,000. Cocoa, 1,000. And then you gave us how much was produced. You went on, Mr. Minister, Mr. Finance Minister, Mr. Agriculture Minister, to identify certain important actions that were necessary. Assist the reformulation of the agro-processed product for agro-processors. Develop and document 5 processing specifications for production process at the laboratory. Expand the production of dried fruits to include the different varieties of mangoes and golden apples. Conduct at least 1 workshop at the Orange Hill Agro-Processing Laboratory on dehydration and dried fruits. Under the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, Common Fund for Commodities Project, conduct 1 training workshop on good manufacturing practices for 5 farmers and so on and so forth. Train staff at the cassava and arrow processing facility in good manufacturing practices. And in collaboration with the Agricultural Statistical Unit, conduct 1 baseline survey among the agro-processors throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines to capture processing data. Where are we today, Madam Speaker? Where are we today, Madam Speaker? Where are we today? 10 years later, Madam Speaker. 10 years later, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture has received $238 million in the recurrent funds and $266 million in this capital program, $500 million, and we are no closer to achieving any of those objectives for 2013. An objective which is a prerequisite, Madam Speaker, to make the structural change that will give us the sustainability and the developmental needs that we are rightfully arguing for. Nowhere near, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, while the export-led growth talk and the contribution to the reduction of the food bill and stimulating the private sector investment are all noble goals, nothing at all wrong with those things, Madam Speaker. We see that nothing's happening. Madam Speaker, what if France is happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? What's happening? What is Spain? Thank you.
Honorable Member, you have 13 minutes.
30 minutes is enough, Madam Speaker. What is Spain is happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Madam Speaker? It's talk, 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 talk. And we're making absolutely no progress. I rebuke you. Not you, you know. I rebuke the devil who seemingly is present. Yes, Madam Speaker. He getting through. He seems to be getting through. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, for me, as a representative, this is where the tire hits the road. Where structural change starts, Madam Speaker. Where resilience is measured. And where transformation is real. And what's my proposition, Madam Speaker? Going back to the $100 million provision for road repairs, $50 million this year. It's simple, Madam Speaker. And even when I was walking through Green Hill last week, I reflected and saw how much more work I have to do. Because I have in the back of my mind, as I stated in this parliament before, I'll have to deny the Minister of Social Welfare. That's what is it? What's the ministry? Minister, Mobilization. That Liberty Lodge property. Because I see there, Madam Speaker, the perfect place for us to locate an agricultural processing plant in the heartland of Green Hill in central Kingston. With a $50 million investment. It may require much road realignment to move the 20 and 40-foot containers along the stretch to the port. But there, Madam Speaker, we begin to process all the soft, wet, dry, dyes, juice, pulp, you name it. Any kind of fruit. And Madam Speaker, that's where we begin to move the needle in employment. Because people now don't have to get up and go to a workplace to be employed. In their backyard garden, they can be meaningfully employed, growing and providing all of the ingredients, all of the necessities for feeding in to that project of processing all of our fruits in St. Vincent. Only then, Madam Speaker, we begin to give meaning to this value-added concept which the Minister of Agriculture has bought into, and which, through intransigence or other reasons, is yet to be delivered in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Madam Speaker, I want to make some quick comments on some other matters because time is nigh. On the national pension reform issue, Madam Speaker, page 57 of his report, I'm saying, I would say something without water in my mouth. While there are genuine actual challenges and there's good management at the NIS, there's much contributory negligence to the situation that we find ourselves in. I name one or two only. It is difficult that at a time when we're saying we have to go into the reserves of the NIS, that we are finding ourselves spending $90 million in a private sector partnership in an industry which we admit was one of the causes why some other countries were slow in their recovery. Those he said our tourism anchored. That's their argument, not mine. But we have no idea, absolutely no ideas, when those kinds of hotel investments will begin to give us dividends or return on the investments. Very risky. And I recall, Madam Speaker, in this Honorable House, the number of times we got in what appeared as had a resemblance of Ponzi schemes, in which national properties will go and borrow monies through the NIS, and then they'll go down to the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they'll collect the monies, and then the monies will end up in the airport. And we thought that was being clever. And then the Juicy building. I remember the statement being made. I don't know what I will tell my children when they come big and they hear that somebody else bought the Juicy building. Well, the children have got big now. There's a whole generation of Vincents who don't even know what's Juicy. They're not like us. They don't even have a concept in the mind of what is a Juicy truck. Just as many Vincents don't even know what the concept of a banana truck means. They don't know what we're talking about. But that's where we tied up a lot of the monies of the NIS, and it should never have happened, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm moving quickly because those are subjects for debate that we'll have as time unfolds. I want to say a little bit on the revised tax and tariff regime for motor vehicles, Madam Speaker. Because I have been presented with invoices which shows that while we may have been well-meaning in the provisions, Madam Speaker, there's at least one case where a same vehicle that would have had $15 million cost in duties, 15,000, sorry, yes. You see, you have your purpose. Have moved to as much as $48 million. $48,000, sorry. I did say that the devil is somewhere inside of here. I just, Corporal, not you, son. You know? And I have had many appeals from people who are affected that we need to revisit and relook this. I don't have the time to go into detail, but guys with the rentals, young couples who have to address the affordability question to get their wives, and girlfriends, and their children off of the bus stops on evenings. While it may be enticing and it might make good sense to get a vehicle within the 8 years regime, they can't afford it. You have to go with what's in your pocket. We heard the case that sometimes people could hardly pay light bill, $4 million water bill, and the mortgage, much more to go and take on a full new car expense. So we have to cut and contrive. And the request, Madam Speaker, is to look at the affordability, manageability, and practicality, and among the business people that are affected in this situation. Madam Speaker, I just want to say on the question of my constituency that with respect to roads, I would not, like my other colleagues, go and adumbrate the number of roads that needs to be repaired. I did ask a question in the last parliament of a number of people, a number of roads that need to be repaired. But I'll come back by way of questions and ask. I'll come back and ask, Madam Speaker, a number of roads questions, and I think that will do me justice. But Madam Speaker, with respect to the Kingston cleanup and the reference to vendoring, I was happy to hear the Minister of Finance's comment on the matter. In all parts of the world, St. Vincent included, something we have to deal with, control chaos. I have no intention to intervene in a way that diminishes the success that has been achieved thus far in getting a number of our vendors into the markets. I believe it still affords us an opportunity to do more work. We can begin to deal with the markets differently, that this market, for example, is for straw and local handicraft and our condiments, and this one is for agricultural produce and so on and so forth. So that, like in the Bahamas, people go to different markets, the tourism, for example, for different purposes. Maybe over time we can look at that again to begin to segment the markets in that kind of way for different purposes. But by all means, Madam Speaker, by all means, we can't have a St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 2023 where the occupants of Middle Street, valued and important guests, and in many cases, natural and naturalized Vincentians, have a better seat at the table than our born and bred Vincentians. When I put on my lecturer's hat, Madam Speaker, I lament that when we look back to the days in which we had the and sons kind of businesses, and these are not personal things, Eustace and Sons known for leathercraft, Hadaway is known for hats and R.H. Charles known for whatever it was, and so on and so forth. C.W. Prescott and Sons known for the pottery and other things. In the middle street, Madam Speaker, very often there was a 6 and 8-inch block that separated one business entity from the other. And if they had all unitedly removed the block, they would have had the biggest mall and the biggest specialization in Kingston. And instead of dying individually, they would have survived collectively. There is a case to help the small business entrepreneur by making Middle Street to be a mall and to regulate the traffic as to what time vehicles can enter to load and unload, what size of the streets may be occupied, and to do the additional work that is also relevant, Minister of Finance, to the other vendors. Maybe there's need for a grand scheme that all fixtures are standardized. There's one standard way note a fixture looks like, maybe one uniform color it looks like, one of the national colors, whether it's the gold, whether it's the green or the blue, or let's go for the neutral, the green or the blue, and maybe of different size according to the type of business for which they're rented, but the tongue looks aesthetically appealing and our people are not put out to pasture already. By a mere stroke of forcing a lot of people into the markets, a lot of people have returned to the breadline because they have lost their little niche and location advantages. And while I'm at that, Madam Speaker, you have to be open-handed and even-handed. You can't have all the vendors off the street of Kingston, but somebody because they're ULP on the Bowman's Gallery. And that's happening. That is happening. Good for the goose, good for the gander. If they have to move, they must all move. But one person must not be allowed to survive simply on a party card. There's already far too much victimization in this country, and it must come to an end. But I make this appeal.
Time to conclude.
To save, Madam Speaker. I conclude, Madam Speaker, by saying that we all have our times and limits for political contribution. And in my constituency, which I hope, I would take a minute, Madam Speaker. I would not test your generosity. I still want to see 5 things achieved in my constituency as I take my leave. The polyclinic, which I have spoken over and over. Today I heard in the parliament, there's a polyclinic now it's coming for South Rivers. So North Central Winwood will have 3 or 4 health centers. Central Kingston, the catchment area still can't have one. I like to see the program, what I call VAREP, Vincentian Association for Retired and Elderly Persons, come into place where we could take care of the elderly. 2, I still want to see us put on a gymnasium, maybe between the grammar school and the high school, but open to the community for indoor sports, playing fields, lighted, lit, the hard courts, etc. The Log Height playing field is in a mess, water soaked. The people of Log Height says they want their link bridge so that the people from Sharps and Green Hill could come across and they can go across, even though they have the other idiosyncrasies. And lastly, Madam Speaker, housing redevelopment in Old Montrose, Jason Cottage, Green Hill, and Sharps. I will leave my comments on national security for another time and occasion. But clearly, Madam Speaker, and this is in this 30-second, this report of the Court of Violent Offenses for Top Prisoners, in which it states that we have over 90-something people in our prisons for homicide, is untenable. The country is small enough to address these security challenges. And if we cannot deal with it on the strength of what we have in hand, let's apply it to the regional mechanism that we have to make safety a priority. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and much obliged.